Welcome, everyone. My name is Candace Black, and I'm your World Language Associate in the Office of Bilingual Education and World Languages. I am your person if you have any questions relative to world languages or the Seal of Biliteracy. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Carissa Zuniga, who is a bilingual associate in that same office. So today we're going to talk about starting a SEAL program at your school. I do want to introduce another of my colleagues. She wasn't feeling well today, so she won't be joining us, but she does work in the Albany office, specifically on the Seal of Biliteracy. Her name is Wing Xiao Zhang, and she is an educational specialist, and her email is there. For attending today's webinar, you will be receiving this handy-dandy digital badge that you see here on the left right afterwards. I already mentioned that all of the materials that we're going to talk about today can be found in the Google folder, but most of them are also available on our website, and that's why I shared that link with you in the chat, and I will continue to share that. So you can use either to access that information. As I mentioned today, given the number of people that are here, we're going to ask that if you do have questions during the webinar, that you enter them into the Google Doc, and if you just give me one moment, I am going to capture that link just one more time so that you can go ahead and enter any questions that you may have. So let me just open up the chat one more time. Questions. There you go. Okay, so now you've got that question catcher. So back to our presentation. Here are our goals for today. I want you to be able to explain what the SEAL is and ways in which students can earn points towards the SEAL. Identify the stages of setting up a SEAL program and a few of the steps that you might start to take at your school. Identify some of the required members on your Seal of Biliteracy committee, as well as the 2 forms that need to be submitted to NYSSB in the course of the year. I'm also going to ask that you be able to identify a few of the resources that I'm going to be presenting for today, as well as a next step that your school can take if you are interested in starting a SEAL program in the near future. And then finally, to identify a support contact for the Seal of Biliteracy. So let's start with the fact that 2024 is an incredibly historic year because it is the very first time that all 50 states, plus the District of Columbia, have a state Seal of Biliteracy program. New York, you can see, is highlighted in darker blue, and we were the second state, only after California, to actually sign on to this program. So the Seal of Biliteracy is an award that recognizes students at your school who can demonstrate they've attained a high level of proficiency in English and another world language by the time they graduate. And peppered throughout this presentation, you're going to see actual pictures of last year's Seal of Biliteracy graduates. So who can earn the Seal of Biliteracy? So any student from any New York State school, whether it be public, charter, or non-public, who is graduating with a Regents diploma and can demonstrate the required proficiency in English and at least one other language, is eligible to earn the Seal of Biliteracy. We know why we want to have multilingual and multiliterate graduates. We know that those people have higher academic achievement. They can act with intercultural competence, and they can also help our nation. They make us more economically competitive. They improve our ability to interact with diverse groups of people, and they also help to leverage inequities, especially for our English language learners. But there's some other important whys that are very local. The first of which is you already have qualified candidates at your school. If you have English language learners or ELLs, if you have heritage language speakers at your school, these are ideal candidates. If your school offers a Checkpoint C course in world language, usually designated as level 4 or 5 or AP or IB, those students are eligible as well. In addition to that, your students most likely have already earned points towards the Seal of Biliteracy by the time you've attended this meeting. If they've gotten an 80 or better on the ELA Regents, they have a point. If they're getting an 85 in their 11th and 12th grade ELA courses, they have a point. If they're doing the same in their world language course, another point. If they're getting a 3 or better on AP English exams or 4 or better on any world language exams, we have Korean here as an example, but it could be any language, they have a point. And if your students are doing projects in those classes, that can be 2 points for those students. From an administrator's perspective, it's also important to know that the Seal of Biliteracy carries the highest weight on a school's readiness measures, which is on par with the New York State Regents Diploma with Advanced Designation, as well as Advanced Placement and International Baccalaureate exams. So for every student that completes the seal, you get 2 points. Now, it's important for me to be forthcoming in that as an administrator, you know that these readiness measures are not additive. So if a student is already getting a point for the New York State Regents Diploma with Advanced Designation, the seal doesn't add on, and vice versa. For offering the seal at your school, students will receive at no charge and at no cost to your district an official seal that goes on their diploma, a notation in the program for their graduation ceremony, which you would do, a medallion to wear at graduation, and a certificate signed by the Associate Commissioner. You can see the medallion as well as the seal and the certificate example here on the right. Now, if we take a look at which students earned the seal historically, we see about 28%, or 1 in every 4 seal earners, is either a current English language learner or one that was formally identified as an ELL, but has since developed the proficiency in English to exit that status. We have almost 20% are what we call our heritage language learners. These are students who weren't identified as English language learners when they entered the school because they already knew English, but they speak a language other than English at home. And a little bit more than half of our seal earners are students whose dominant language is English, but who are studying a world language in school. So last year we had students earn the seal in 80 different languages, which is the second highest in the nation, only surpassed by the state of Washington, which has an incredible indigenous population. For last year, we passed another milestone, and that was 10,600 students earned the Seal of Biliteracy statewide, which was the first time we surpassed that 5-figure mark. Now, it's important to know, though, even though we have this great number of 10,000, less than 3% of New York State high school graduates actually earn the seal. And that's not because students are trying for it and they're not getting it. It's because we have less than half of our schools are actually offering the Seal of Biliteracy. And if the school doesn't offer it, the students can't earn it. So help your students stand out from the crowd on their college applications, their work applications, by earning this distinction. Now, you may have heard in the news, but we actually have quite a number of students who earn multiple seals. So the beginning slide, you saw that to get the seal, they had to demonstrate proficiency in English and at least one other world language. But we had 303 students earn the seal in English plus 2 languages last year, which is a 40% increase from the prior year. We had 17 students do this in 3 languages plus English, and we had 3 students earn the Seal of Biliteracy in 4 languages in addition to English. Now, one of those earners is this young lady here in red. Her name is Olivia Pareto, and she is from the White Plains School District. She is shown here with the gentleman in the center, who is Dr. Miguel Cardona, the U.S. Secretary of Education, who honored us with his presence at the first ever SEAL Summit in Washington, D.C. last June. Olivia actually presented to a group of about 200 state representatives and talked about her journey to the Seal of Biliteracy. She's flanked on the left by her grandmother and mother, who is also a Spanish teacher, as well as her coordinator from White Plains. Now, if that wasn't amazing enough, we also made history last year in Helena Cotman. Helena was a graduate last year from Haldane High School in the Hudson Valley, and she is the first student in not only New York history, but U.S. history that we know of that has earned a Seal of Biliteracy in 5 world languages in addition to English, and those are listed there on the screen. And we have captured these student voices. So I'm not going to play this video, but one of the things that is linked in the slideshow that you have in the handouts folder is a 5-minute video with these 4 students. I've already introduced Olivia and Helena, our 4 seal and 5 seal earner respectively. We also have some words from Thomas Willis from Cicero North Syracuse, who was the only New York winner of the LTI Seal of Biliteracy Scholarship. And we have Mr. Timothy Williams, who is one of the first 2 students to ever earn the Seal of Biliteracy in the Seneca language. We encourage you to consider showing these videos either at faculty meetings, school events, but definitely to students who are interested in the Seal of Biliteracy, as students talk about why they chose to do this and how it's enhanced their lives. So let's talk about how many schools are offering the seal, and then we're going to dive into how do you set a program up at your school. So we had 499 schools offer the seal last year, which was a 17% increase. And you can see from the chart that we've had increases every single year. Now, one thing you don't see on the chart is any evidence of a worldwide pandemic, which is really a testament to the resilience of both our educators and our students during that time. This graph that you see here shows by region the number of schools offering the Seal of Biliteracy in blue. But as I click, you're going to see a darker blue bar appear, and these are the number of schools in each region that currently do not offer the Seal of Biliteracy. So you can see in some regions like the Hudson Valley, Long Island, Mid-State, Midwest, that they have already surpassed that 50% penetration mark into the schools, but we still have a lot of work to do. So we're hoping that many of the schools that are in this darker blue shaded area will consider offering the Seal of Biliteracy this year or in the future. So how does a student earn the seal? New York is pretty unique in that we provide a points matrix for students where they can choose to do different tasks to be able to demonstrate their proficiency, which provides a lot of flexibility for students. And so in essence, they have to get 3 points in English and 3 points in the other language. And I've created a graphic here to make this simple for you. So there are 5 different criteria plus a little extra one for students to earn a point. And I've categorized these as blue. These criteria are available to all students. You're going to see 2 of them are gold. These are criteria that are reserved just for our English language learners. So the first one, as I mentioned before, is an 80 or better on the ELA Regents. That's a point. Our English language learners can also get a point by getting 290 or better on the NYSSB test as long as it's taken during their high school career. So they can't take it in 2nd grade and get the 290. All students can also get an 85 or better average in their 11th and 12th grade ELA courses. That includes any English elective courses like journalism or creative writing. They can take an approved English assessment and get the required score and get a point, and we'll go over what those are. And they can also do a project in English, and that can count for 2 points. Now, this last option for our English language learners is they can also get a point by getting a 75 or better on any 2 Regents exams other than ELA that they take without using the translation option. So if you have an English language learner that takes, say, algebra and global, and they take it in its original format, meaning in English, and they get a 75, that is a point for the Seal of Biliteracy. So let's talk a little bit about the English assessments. I've cited the major ones here on the left in the graphic. And it's important to know that SEAL candidates can use scores on the SEAL from assessments taken at any time in high school. Again, they can't take these exams in middle school or elementary school. They can retake any portion of the assessment that they perhaps didn't pass in order to attempt to get that minimum score, as long as the vendor allows it. So for instance, the AP exam is not going to let you, as far as I know, retake different portions of their exam. But for instance, the Stamp 4S and the Apple exam do allow you to take only the portions that you didn't do well on. Students can actually earn 2 points for Criterion 1D, even though the criterion itself is only earned 1 if they get the minimum score on any 2 different assessments. So for instance, if your students take AP English language as juniors, and AP English Literature as seniors, and they get a 3 on each exam, that's 2 points right there out of the 3 they need. Now, this is an important point that I'm going to come back to, and that is the timing of the assessment is important. Students need to be assessed when they are most likely to be successful at reaching that required proficiency level. And that's going to mean a catered plan for each student based on what their dominant language is. It's also important to note that when the assessment is a required path to the seal, and we're going to say what that means, it's paid for by the schools or district. So 2 important points here. We are not saying that districts need to pay for the AP or IB exams. Those are part of a regular curriculum. What we're saying is that if you have a student who is going to do the seal in Swahili and you don't offer Swahili courses at your school, then most likely the student's pathway to the seal would be to take one of the approved Swahili assessments and do a project, because the student doesn't have the option of doing, say, the 1 or the 2A coursework. In that case, the assessment is paid for by the school, but many of these assessments are $20, $25 a student, so they are very reasonable. Now, the last set of points that the student can earn in English is called the culminating project. So I want to spend a few minutes on what is this culminating project. The project consists of 3 different parts, and they correspond to the world language standards from NYSSB. First is our interpretive communication. You'll see that this is designated by an icon where all the arrows are coming into the person. That's because it's one-way communication coming into the student, and it involves reading and listening. So the student's project involves the student conducting research on a topic of interest using authentic resources in English. So they might read books or articles, they might listen to podcasts or videos, and their interpretive skills, that is reading and listening, are generally evaluated over time by the classroom teacher. It's kind of a holistic judgment of how the student is doing in those 2 skills. The second of the 2 parts of the project, of the 3, is presentational communication. Notice the icon is completely different. It's the person with the arrows going out. This is one-way communication where the student either speaks or writes, but doesn't get a response. And so this is generally speeches that a student will give, or they write an essay. So essentially, the student will submit a written narrative that accompanies the project. Sometimes it's a summary of the project, describing what they did. And this writing portion is evaluated by the panel at the time that the student presents. Please be aware that text on slides like PowerPoint does not constitute a written narrative. We're talking about academic writing that's written in paragraph form. The other part of presentational communication is presentational speaking. This is what students do when they present their project to the panel. They'll do this either orally or via sign language to a panel of at least 2 reviewers, and they can use or not use a visual aid such as slides. That oral or sign presentation is evaluated by the panel at the time of the presentation itself. Now, the final part of the project is interpersonal communication. And again, if you look at that icon, it has 2 people with the arrows going both ways. So this is the interview that occurs between the panel and the student following their presentation. Generally, the panel will simply ask the student questions about their presentation in English. Now, it's important to spend time on this culminating project because we know from our data that 75% of SEAL earners earn 2 of their 3 points from a culminating project. So we recommend that the culminating project in English be embedded into one of the students' normal courses so that it's not an extra task that they have to do. This can be embedded into any course in which the language of instruction is English. So maybe you have an ELA project in junior year that students could use as their SEAL project. Maybe they're doing a social studies project or science. It doesn't matter. It can be embedded into any of those classes. The project itself can be prepared at any time in high school, but again, should be timed for when the SEAL candidate is most likely to be able to reach that required proficiency level. So you're not going to have students present in freshman year if they haven't developed the required proficiency. And so this is where you're going to want to think about your English dominant students and your students whose dominant language is other than English to really time these presentations. We mentioned that the culminating project is presented to and evaluated by a panel of at least 2 English-speaking adults. They can't be related to the student, but they don't have to be the classroom teacher, although they often are. But they could be, say, the classroom teacher and the principal. As long as the principal is an English speaker, that'll work. They can also be revised and represented at the school's discretion if the student is unsuccessful on the first attempt. And a little plug here for the Seal of Civic Readiness. If you're not aware, there is a Seal of Civic Readiness that is usually embedded within the social studies class that has a lot of commonalities with the Seal of Biliteracy. In the Seal of Civic Readiness, one of the options that the student has is to do a project in English. And I want to make sure you know that a student who does such a project can actually use that project also for the Seal of Biliteracy. It still has to be presented and the student has to be interviewed because we're evaluating language proficiency, not necessarily their civic readiness. But know that there are ways in which students can, quote, double dip. So we covered how students earn points in a world language, in English. Let's talk about how they do so in a world language. And you're going to see a very similar graphic. And just as with English, students can use any combination of points in order to get the 3 that they need to earn the seal. So first, we have 85 or better as a course average in a Checkpoint C course. A Checkpoint C course is generally level 4 or 5. It could be AP, IB, college and the high school. It's anything after Checkpoint B, which is traditionally taught in 10th grade, so it would be 11th or 12th grade. Our English language learners generally can also submit a transcript from another nation where the language of instruction was other than English. And if they have 3 years on that transcript, starting in 8th grade, and it shows a B or average better, that is a point. It's not a very common point that we see with the Seal of Biliteracy, and you don't have to be an English language learner to use this point, but it is mostly our English language learners who do come from abroad with transcripts. Another way to earn a point is getting an 85 or better in any required home language arts courses. Again, this is mostly for our English language learners who are taking Spanish language arts in their high school. They get an 85 and that's a point. Just like with English, students can also earn points by achieving the required score on any of our approved Checkpoint C assessments. And yes, students can also earn up to 2 points from this criteria by getting passing scores on 2 different assessments. So for instance, if your juniors take Spanish language, an AP Spanish language test, they can get a 4 on it and get a point. And if as seniors, they take AP Spanish literature, that's another point. In addition to that, many of the exams that are on our approved Checkpoint C assessment list are recognized by colleges, and these colleges may use these scores for either placement and or credit at the college level. So there's some benefits to taking these. And then finally, the students can also do a project in the world language, again, for 2 points. So a couple of notes on approved Checkpoint C assessments. Again, they can use scores towards the seal from any of these assessments taken during high school. They can retake portions of the assessments where it's allowed by vendors. They can get 2 points for this criteria by taking 2 different assessments. And as a reminder, students have to be assessed when they are most likely to be able to reach the required proficiency level, and assessments when they're a required path must be paid for by the school. Now we have currently 111 different languages listed on our approved Checkpoint C assessment lists. And you can find all of these in the SEAL handbook on our website, which is also one of the important links that I shared with you on that Google Doc. Now, when there's only one exam available for a particular language, if the student wants a point from that criteria, they have to take that one exam. If there's more than one exam listed for a particular language, students have to take the exam that's available in the most modalities. Now, modalities is what we talked about with interpretive, presentational, and interpersonal. So if there's an exam that is available in 2 of those modalities and there's another one in just one modality, the student has to take the one that's available in 2 modalities. Now, we do have instances when there is no exam available in a particular language, and we don't want to discriminate students in that case, so we authorize schools to have an adult speaker of the language interview the students to determine if their interpersonal proficiency meets the requirement. And if it does, the student gets a point for that criterion 2D. It's not a very frequent occurrence, but it does happen. This is the page from our handbook where you can see some of our approved Checkpoint C assessments. You have the English ones on the left and just some of the world language ones on the right. You'll notice that all of the vendors are linked, so you can choose the one you want to get more information. You also can see in the last column, you have the minimum scores required in order to get a point. Now, you may notice on the left, for instance, in the first row, you see that the Apple exam has tests in category 1, 2 languages and 3, 4 languages. This is an important distinction because it changes the proficiency level that's required. For the vast majority of languages that are taught in our schools, which is French, German, Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish, those languages are called category 1, 2, and these require what's called intermediate high proficiency. Other languages, most of which will use, they're either character-based or they use a non-Roman alphabet, like Arabic, Japanese, Greek, Hebrew, Korean, Mandarin, etc. These are considered category 3, 4 languages, which means research shows it takes more hours of instruction to get students to the same proficiency level, and therefore the required proficiency level for the SEAL is slightly lower. It's intermediate mid instead of intermediate high. We have a number of webinars just on this that I'm going to encourage you to check out. Now, when you think about selecting assessment, it can be a little overwhelming because there are quite a lot out there. So I've put together some factors that schools should consider when looking at the different assessments. So think about when you want the student to test. Is it a paper test or a computer-based test? What you need to put in place to administer the exam. So do you need a computer? Can you get a proctor? Do you have space? Is there other technology needed, like headphones, for instance? And then what is the cost of the exam? Some of the exams are very inexpensive. You'll find they're between $20 and $30 a student, and other exams are more like $200. So it's important to really do your homework. As a school, you're also going to want to check that the vendor is Ed2D compliant. These vendors know that we are promoting their exams to you, and so they should be very flexible in making sure that they provide the necessary paperwork to ensure that your district knows they are 2D compliant. If you're from the New York City area, the New York City public school system has already done this with one of the vendors. So the Avant stamp tests are in fact pre-approved through their IRMA process. But again, you'll contact your district about that. Finally, you're going to want to think about what the turnaround time is to get results. So if you want your students to have their medallions for graduation, you're going to want to make sure that they test no later than, say, early to mid-May so you can get those results back. I want to point out that a number of the vendors have demo exams on their websites in the target language. So if you as the teacher or SEAL coordinator or your students would like to see what the test is like, they can actually take it's not a full exam, but it's a portion of each section of the exam so that they know what it's like. Now, the culminating projects in a world language are very similar. In fact, they have the same exact elements as the English version, so I'm not going to go through those. But I will clarify for you that when presenting in a world language, students are presenting their projects entirely in the target language. And then panels are interviewing the students entirely in the target language. Students cannot take an English project that they've done and simply translate it. That is not allowed. But students can do two projects, one project for English and one project for world languages. And actually, it's a pretty common occurrence that that happens. Students who are completing a project in a language that is not taught at your school needs to be provided with what we call an advisor. This is someone who is an adult. It could be a family member, a community member, someone who preferably speaks the language and can assist the student through the project. It's not mandatory that they speak the language, just a caring adult who is familiar with research process can help, but it's more helpful when they also speak the language. You may want to start with your faculty or staff. I bet that you have at least one faculty or staff member in your district who speaks a language other than English. And how awesome would it be to have a history teacher from middle school that happens to speak Spanish, or a guidance counselor that happens to speak Greek and would like to work with the student through that. You can also look to your local colleges. They love to get good PR by assisting high schools with this process. Now, you may have noticed that when I talked about the project, I mentioned that the panel of evaluators consists of two people. Generally, one person is the classroom teacher if it's taught in school, and another person might be, say, a middle school teacher or another staff members. When you have less commonly taught languages, like Swahili, I'll give you that example again, we realize it may be very difficult to find two panelists that speak that language. So for those languages, you can have a single panelist. But obviously for languages that are taught in a district, you have to have at least two people evaluate each student, and they both have to be speakers of the language. Just to clarify, you can't have an English dominant or English monolingual adult evaluate a student who's giving a presentation in Spanish, because the monolingual adult who speaks English will not be able to understand the presentation. Now, before I mentioned to you that the English Culminating Project was done by about 75% of SEAL earners, that number jumps to 95% when we talk about world languages. It's a very popular option, probably because it's worth 2 of the 3 points that they need. So it's very important as you go through this process to really think about purposeful timing of the work, because this will lead to student success. So think about your populations again, your English dominant students versus those who have a dominant language that's other than English. So some of our most effective SEAL schools have students complete the work for the SEAL in whatever their strongest language is in junior year. And that leaves the senior year for students to focus on the SEAL work in the opposite language. This spaces the work out for both students and teachers, and students actually accumulate those points, which increases their motivation, because they'll think, well, I already have 3 of the 6 points that I need to earn the SEAL. And it also increases their willingness to follow through to finish that work. So I've just gone over in 10 minutes time what the different criteria are. I'm showing you here on the right our criteria document. So the first 2 columns are English and the point values there. The second 2 columns are world language and the points there. Now I've highlighted these to show you what the most common pathways are. In English, students generally get an 85 or better on the ELA Regents. They complete their ELA courses with an 85, and they do a project. That actually gets them 4 points, and they only need 3. So you could always have a student who gets an 85 on the ELA Regents, but maybe it only has an 82 average, but then does the project. On the world language side, the vast majority of students who are taking a language in school get a point from their Checkpoint C class by getting an 85 or better and doing the project. But remember, every student is different, and they can have a different pathway to the SEAL. So we're going to wrap up the last third of our presentation today with what the 5 stages are of starting a Seal of Biliteracy program. And there is a whole guidance toolkit that's made up of 8 modules designed to guide a Seal of Biliteracy committee through the first year of offering it. So I'm just going to give this to you in a nutshell. The document that you see here on the left, this is the first page of our suggested timeline. which outlines the various tasks at each stage and giving you suggested months. So let's take a look at those stages. The first one is our planning stage, and this is generally now through the month of November. In this stage, you're going to form your Seal of Biliteracy committee, which must have at least 4 members. That's an administrator, a school counselor, a world language teacher, and an ELA teacher. Now, if you also have ELLs or English language learners who will be pursuing the seal, you need to have an ENL teacher, an English as a new language teacher on that committee. And you'll generally identify from that committee one person who will serve as the coordinator that will coordinate the work of the seal. You'll also, at that time, review the seal resources we have. You'll read through the handbook. Maybe you'll go into the guidance toolkit and use that as a guide. And you'll make a month-by-month plan of how you're going to implement the seal. In the recruitment stage, which is generally November through December, you'll start to collect data based on the seal criteria to identify who is an eligible candidate in your current senior class. You can also, by the way, do this early if you want to recruit juniors. You're going to raise awareness about the seal with your faculty so that each member can give a little elevator speech to encourage students and parents. You'll reach out to both students, maybe through class presentations, and families, maybe through emails or letters home, inviting those eligible candidates to consider pursuing the seal. And you can also have some of our literature available at any kinds of school nights that you have. In the third stage, you're going to actually implement, and this is generally between December and April. Your seal coordinator will submit the first of 2 forms that are required. It's called the school notification form, and it doesn't involve you reporting actual students, but simply tells us your school is interested in offering the seal this year and gives us an idea of how many eligible candidates you have, not the ones that have said, I want to do the seal, but just the total population that is even eligible. And we use this information to be able to order those seals and medallions for you. At this time, you'll also determine which students are interested because you've raised awareness with those population, and you'll identify each student's pathway to the seal. So you'll find out what points the students has already earned and then how they need to make up the difference. You'll then monitor students' progress via their classroom teachers or their project advisor, and you'll keep track of the points that they earn. And then towards the end of the stage, you will have students present and you will evaluate their culminating projects. Now, the last 2 stages are the most fun. Your 4th stage is your celebration stage. This is between May and June. And this is when you'll finalize the second of 2 forms that you send to NYSSB, and it's called our end of year data form. And this simply shows how each student earned their points. Student names are not submitted. We use the NYSSB number to protect their privacy. But then you'll make arrangements to celebrate your seal earners. Some schools will add on to an existing award ceremony. Others will have a different celebration. Some will put announcements on, call students down for an assembly. I know when I was still teaching, I presented my students with their medallions at the last Board of Education meeting of the year, and the board members actually put the medallions around students' necks. So it was a wonderful way to increase their awareness as well. You'll also, during this stage, receive the seal stickers to put on the student diplomas. You'll get the medallions to distribute to students to wear at graduation, and you'll be putting a notation in both the graduation program, and then the counselors will be putting a official notation on the student's official transcript after they graduate. Now, your final stage is your reflection stage, and this is generally the end of school until the beginning of the new school year. And this is where you'll get together as a committee and talk about what went well during the year and what you might want to do to improve. How would you, for instance, encourage more candidates to apply? Are there any barriers that exist that you might break down? Are there any additional supports for candidates, whether they be English language learners or perhaps special education students, to encourage them to pursue the seal? We also recommend that you maybe touch base with other local schools who have offered the seal maybe a little bit longer than you have. And you can always contact me to get the names of those schools. By the way, on our seal website, right below the picture on the main page, you have an Excel file which lists all of the schools that have offered the seal. So you'll be able to see which ones in your area offer it. So we're going to wrap up today with talking about what resources are available to you. And we provide 3 different sources of support. We have a task force and a forum, which I'll speak about in just a second. We have webinars and resources, and we provide technical assistance and school visits. So here are just some of the resources that we offer. I'm going to make sure I speak about each one. First and foremost, we have the SEAL Handbook. This is a wonderful document that's got over 100 questions and answers, everything that you want to know about the SEAL and more. So we highly recommend you download this and go through it. As I mentioned before, we also have a guidance toolkit that consists of 8 different modules, starting from getting started and all the way to completing the end of your data form. And these are designed to guide a Seal of Biliteracy committee through the first year of implementation. Please do keep in mind that these were made about 3 years ago. We have done some tweaks to our program, but there's nothing that's major that if you did it would be an issue for this. We also have one-pagers for students, counselors, administrators, families, culminating project advisors, and teachers, of course. These are 2-page documents which concisely talk about the seal and how it benefits students. And by the way, we have the one-pagers for students and family available in 10 different languages, which are listed here on your screen. We also have both the criteria document, which you see on the left, and the culminating project rubric, which you see on the right, available in 11 different languages. So it's English plus 10 different languages. We also have tons of infographics, both for the state as well as for your region, and a large report should you want to be able to share that with your Board of Education to talk about how your school performs relative to others. And last year, we had our very first professional learning series for the Seal of Biliteracy. So you can see on your screen 8 different badges on all kinds of topics. Every year we offer a Starting a Seal program, which you can see is this badge. And then we went through and we talked about how do you complete the 2 forms, how do you promote the seal, and then how do you shepherd the students through the process. I highly recommend these. They are all less than 1 hour. You can get the recordings of these webinars on our website. You can watch them at any time you want when it's convenient for you, and you can actually get credit just for watching the webinar by taking an online post-assessment that's on the website. It's multiple choice, and you have to get a 7 out of 10. If you do, a certificate is sent to you within 24 hours documenting either attendance or CTLE, whatever you prefer. Now, I want to mention something that you cannot register for because it's already taking place, but there will be an opportunity next year. We're offering our very first Seal of Biliteracy book study. We have 2 national authors, Dr. Kristen Davin and Dr. Amy Heinecke, who wrote Promoting Multilingualism in Schools, a Framework for Implementing the Seal of Biliteracy. We have 170 people that are currently participating in this online book study. They meet once a month for an hour and a half after school, and they get a free book. They get 27 hours of CTLE credits. And we will be offering this book study again next year. These book studies are generally promoted in the spring, so registration will open about late March to early April if you would like to participate next year. Now, we also offer digital badges for our SEAL schools. You can see a couple of examples here. Every year that you offer the SEAL, you'll get a SEAL badge, but we also have milestone badges, like if it's your first year or if you're a veteran school. We also have badges for schools that have students who earn the SEAL in more than 1 language in addition to English. And you can use these on your school website. Some people have printed them out and put them up as banners. You can also put them in your school communications. So lastly, we want to talk about support. So we have a couple of ways that we support Seal of Biliteracy coordinators in particular, and one of them is called the SEAL Forum. This is a monthly meeting that offers guidance and support on the Seal of Biliteracy. It meets 1 hour. It's actually on Wednesdays this year, not Monday. I apologize for that. It's after school. We haven't had our October meeting yet. Attendance is completely voluntary. You get credit for any of the meetings that you do attend, and we do have a Google folder for this. So if you're unable to attend the meeting, you can still get the slides and the minutes from the meeting. The join link is right there. Feel free to consider that. Now, we also have local help in terms of physical people in your region. So take a look at this New York State map. These are what we call our ARBURN regions. So each region has a regional bilingual education resource network, or ARBURN. And each ARBURN has someone that is specifically designated to support SEAL schools in their region. So you can locate your region and then identify your person. And I will make sure that I provide in the share folder the emails for all of these people. And they're all located at one of the BOCES, with the exception of our New York City person who's located, their ARBURN is part of Fordham University. But if you're a New York City school, you also have the support of the Office of Multilingual Learners from the New York City DOE. So I think we were able to get through all of our goals. I hope that you feel that you can do many of these tasks.